Today's episode is brought to you by DeSanto Propane. DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane. Today, we continue our series previewing local elections across the region by catching up with one of the candidates running for Ontario County Coroner. Nancy Augustine joined me in studio this week, and we talked about her candidacy as well as the biggest issues facing residents in Ontario County. Check it out. Thanks for taking the time today to talk with us.
Thanks, Josh, for having me.
So let's start with some background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Okay. I am born and raised in Geneva and have lived there my entire life, raised my children there. I have worked at Geneva General for over 30 years and in the core lab. So my education's in laboratory science. New York State calls it clinical laboratory scientist. And for the past 12, I think it is, I've been working side by side with Dr. Dean, assisting him with autopsies. So it's complete healthcare science field for my background.
What is that experience like, and how did that sort of lead you to this moment of, I want to run for coroner?
What is the experience like of assisting with autopsies?
Yeah, doing that over a long period of time, and how did it lead you to this point of, this is what I want to do, I want to run for this office?
Dr. Dean is actually the one who put the idea in my head a few years ago. And we were in the middle of an autopsy, and he said, I think you'd be a good coroner, just off the top of his head. I think also that he knows my eye for detail, and maybe that's what sparked the conversation back then. So I've been thinking about it for a few years. And this year I just decided to dive in, not knowing there were 4 of us there, for 2 positions. I didn't know it was going to be so competitive this year, but who would have thought, a coroner position would be competitive? Attention
to detail, you mentioned that, but what do you think are some of the characteristics that would make a strong coroner in Ontario County?
Well, my opinion is that you not only need to be empathetic and caring and attentive to the family or the neighbors who may be at the scene, but you have to show up to the scene. You have to respond in a timely manner. And that, from what I'm hearing from first responders and people in the community, that different events I've been to for the past few months especially, that is what they're not seeing. No one is responding. Let me back up. No one is not a good word. Some are not responding as they should.
Is that a logistical challenge, given that Ontario County is large and rural and...
Shouldn't be. Yeah. No. Everybody has GPS, and certainly dispatch and law enforcement are there to help you if you get lost or whatever. But it's a large county for sure. And it seems like the coroners are pretty much on the east side right now. We did have Dr. Long, who just retired. He was in Naples, so he kind of took care of calls in that area, but it's just part of the job. You have to go anywhere the call comes in from.
Is that, if you can, speak to how it's currently organized and what you think would make sense for organizing that? Would it make more sense to sort of have the coroners representing geographical portions of the county, or just the whole county? Because it could be the difference between a 10-minute drive and a 35-minute drive in some cases, right?
Right, yeah. It's definitely going to be a drive when you have to go to Bloomfield from where we are, or Naples, wherever. I don't know anyone from that area that stepped up and wanted to walk into this position. So
yeah.
It is what it is as far as the timing. And it's a concern, come wintertime, the hills of Bristol and all of that, but we'll get there.
what is, and I'm sure maybe this is a case by case thing, but what is appropriate response time? Because that's a criticism that I've heard that criticism before in Seneca County. It seems like rural counties that are spread out, sometimes it might be an hour, sometimes it might be, 45 minutes. Is it a case by case thing that you're hearing where interpretations of efficient response are different, or does it seem like there's kind of like an expectation? Okay, you should be here within an hour.
I would think you should be there within an hour. If you can't take the call, it flips over to the next coroner. But that's part of the issue too, is that some of the coroners have had more cases than others. Some respond, some don't. In my opinion, you should definitely be there within the hour. The sooner the better, because you're holding up law enforcement, EMS from being able to leave the scene to go on and do what they need to do in their actual job. So,
is it a scenario where you think down the road, perhaps the county should or could explore additional coroners to meet the demand?
I don't know what is going to happen in the future. I'm going to go back to Dr. Dean for a minute. Dr. Dean is the only pathologist for Ontario, Seneca, Wayne, and Yates counties. I know he's looking to retire sooner than later. Mm-hmm. I've heard and read about the county thinking about having a medical examiner. And if that happens, then there would be deputy coroners beneath. Mm-hmm. So that could be a future option. I don't know what'll happen I don't think we need any more coroners. I think from what I've seen, seems to be the number. I've met a lot of coroners through the years doing the autopsies with Dr. Dean, and I believe Seneca has 4, Yates has 4, Ontario has 4. I'm not sure about Wayne County, but
when you're talking to voters at these events, when you're campaigning, what are the issues other than response time? What are some of the issues that they're bringing to your attention that you think really should be priorities?
Honestly, people don't really think about this position. You don't think about an elected coroner position from what I'm hearing, nor did I before really.
Hand up, me included. It's one of those positions that, frankly, a lot of, excuse my candor, but a lot of people just think shouldn't be an elected position.
Right.
Because what's the difference between a Republican coroner and a Democratic coroner or a conservative? It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense present day.
No, and I get that. But if it was an assigned position, you could be stuck with a bad coroner for years and years with no option of, removing them from the job. I don't hear much from anyone out there. They're usually asking me, why do you want to do this job? Well, I think that you all deserve somebody to be there for you when you're not even realizing what's going on. A lot of people don't understand what a coroner does, but somebody has to be at the scene. Somebody has to sign the death certificate. And somebody should be there to help you when you ask the question, what do I do now? And I'm sure if you've been in the situation, I know I've been in the situation of losing a loved one, what do I do now? That seems to be the big question. So
there's that. I would call it that. You mentioned response time. It's that like 45 minutes to an hour where you're in a fog and you don't really know like what is what's going on here.
Exactly.
From an from an administrative standpoint, how do you think you are best suited to be a good coroner for Ontario County?
Well, I can tell you that I will always answer the phone. If the call comes to me and I cannot take it. The reason for that.
What's the relationship like between a coroner and law enforcement? I would assume there's got to be some overlap, right?
Overlap?
Yeah, in terms of working together, communicating during these situations.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, obviously, first responders, law enforcement are at the scene. Hopefully, the coroner isn't much longer after that. It's up to law enforcement to also investigate the scene. Coroners should definitely be investigating the scene, talking to family if there's medications the person was on, etc. So, huge interaction. And that's what I'm hearing, as you, I think, mentioned earlier, that first responders, this is what I'm hearing, first responders are a little annoyed by the fact that they have to stay at the scene, or law enforcement has to stay at the scene, to wait for the coroner to arrive and do their job. Of that happening back in, I'm going to say, early summer. It was out on County Road 33, which is, I think, South Bristol. There was a motorcycle accident. A man and woman hit a deer and were killed. Took 3 hours for the coroner to arrive. 3 hours. To me, that's just uncalled for. I don't know the situation as far as why it took so long for that coroner to finally arrive, or to get a coroner to arrive, but it's just unacceptable. So obviously you want to be there as quickly as possible. Law enforcement will stay there until the scene is cleared. We all know that. But once the body is removed and the coroner probably gets all the details they need to get, then they can leave the scene.
Or at least move forward with what they need to do next, because
Right.
it probably also holds up what law enforcement is able to do or not do
Right.
based on how quickly a coroner gets there.
Right.
Oddly fascinating. It really is. And it speaks to the bigger issues, I think, that a lot of rural counties face in general with first responders. Response time is a problem with fire and EMS service in parts of the region too.
Yeah.
It's just a very challenging and delicate situation. And I guess that's where I'd like to end this is delicate work, right? This is not blunt work in any way, shape, or form. This requires a delicate approach. For those listening, for those watching, what's your message to those who want someone who's going to respond in a timely fashion, but also wants a coroner who's going to have that perspective, the medical experience, and the delicacy that's necessary in these situations?
I've seen a huge gap in the past 10 to 12 years of working in the morgue. Coroners, when I started down there, coroners came in, and it's not required that a coroner come to an autopsy, but I feel like there's been a gap that I've seen grow in the last decade of not paying enough attention and giving enough care, it seems, to what your job is. Your job is to go there, give as much care and attention to the decedent as well as the family, be empathetic, sympathetic, give them the information they need to move on from that point. Know your job and do your job. I was just listening to an interview a few days ago. Do you know Jack Antonoff?
Yeah.
Okay. It was a great interview, and he was talking in his industry about space. And if you can't do your job, if your job has worn you too thin, maybe it's time for you to step back because there's somebody else that can fill that space. And I think it's in any industry, but definitely I'm seeing it where we stand right now with the coroners. If you can't do your job, if you don't want to do your job, back off because there's somebody else that can most likely do the job just as well as you have done it, or even better.
Best way for folks to get in touch with you if they have questions or want to learn more about your campaign?
I do have a Facebook page, Nancy Augustine for Coroner. My daughter set it up for me. I don't have Facebook personally, so I'm thinking you could probably search it and find it that way. I do have an email, but it's a personal email. I don't know that I want to give that out. Probably the Facebook page.
Goes for Facebook.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan. Nancy, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
That'll do it for this edition of FLX Today. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, check out the show on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to the FingerLakes1.com YouTube channel. Have a great day, and we will see you next time.